1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Оригінал чуєте? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Один, два, три, 1, 2, 3. Один, два, три, 1, 2, 3. Технічна перевірка. 1, 2, 3. Це для преси, для запитань.
No, I'm not saying anything. Do you want me to move over?
То есть это микрофон или телефон? Я не знаю. Можно нажать это? Да? Хорошо?
Можете підійти на секундочку? Да, а це ви, да, поставили інший набір? Тому що ми ставили всім однаково. Можете ваших колег спитати?
This is the secretary. This is the secretary.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's
Yep. I tested it.
okay.
It works.
Because our unit is working.
It works. Yeah.
Because he prepared the sensor for
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. This is the secretary. We tested it. Test it again. Be sure.
So, dear colleagues, let's get prepared. We're starting shortly. You might need headphones, Excellencies.
Thank you.
Пане міністре, прошу.
Доброго дня всім. Радий вітати у Києві мого американського та британського колег. Це була моя перша зустріч в якості міністра з Ентоні та Девідом і вперше такий тристоронній формат. Ми мали чудову атмосферу, дуже продуктивні і деталізовані перемовини, причому не лише в МЗС, але й на переговорах моїх колег із президентом України Володимиром Зеленським. Це були переговори справжніх союзників. Ми вдячні США та Великій Британії за непохитну підтримку України, її територіальної цілісності та суверенітету. Це був насичений день як для наших гостей, так і для нашої держави. Дуже важливо, що Ентоні та Девід взяли участь у 4-му саміті Кримської платформи, який сьогодні відбувся, але ще й в принципі триває. Справедливий і тривалий мир неможливий без відновлення суверенітету та територіальної цілісності України, включно з Кримом. Крим – це Україна. Сьогодні, 11 вересня, трагічна дата для американського народу, 23-я річниця жахливих терористичних атак проти Сполучених Штатів. І я висловив співчуття державному секретарю та в його особі усьому американському народі. Ми, як ніхто, знаємо ціну людського життя та відчуваємо біль втрати. Головна тема, яку ми обговорювали сьогодні з колегами – посилення оборонних спроможностей нашої держави. ППО, F-16, артилерійські снаряди, дрони, бронетехніка та інше обладнання – все, що працює на перемогу. Окремо наголосив на важливості збільшення інвестицій в закупівлю української зброї для українських захисників. Це спосіб швидко збільшити військову допомогу Україні та зекономити ресурси наших союзників. Ключове завдання цієї осені – максимальне посилення повітряного щита. Для захисту наших людей необхідні сміливі дії усіх партнерів. Важливо скасувати будь-які обмеження на використання американської та британської зброї проти законних військових цілей на території Росії. Потрібна рішучість і щодо збиття російських ракет і дронів у небі над Україною. Чим далі зможе бити Україна, тим ближче буде справедливий мир. Ці кроки важливі в контексті повідомлень про можливу передачу Іраном балістичних ракет Росії. Вороги вільного світу не сумніваються, вони діють та створюють неприйнятні загрози для всієї Європи та Близького Сходу. У таких умовах не може бути сумнівів у рядах демократій. Маємо діяти сміливо. Маємо бути співлідерами коаліції сміливості. Необхідно посилювати санкції проти Росії та закрити повністю будь-які лазівки для їхнього обходу. Маємо повністю закрити Росії доступ до ресурсів для продовження війни. Важлива і подальша робота над використанням заморожених російських активів задля підтримки України. Росія має заплатити. Міжнародне право надає всі законні підстави для використання не лише прибутків відсотків, але й самих активів. Закликаємо до рішучих спільних дій. Окремо обговорили кроки з посилення економічної стійкості та енергетичної безпеки України напередодні зими. Вдячні США та Великій Британії за підтримку нашої енергетики. Окремо поінформував колег про застосування Росією боєприпасів, які містять небезпечні хімічні речовини проти наших воїнів, і наголосив на необхідності жорсткої колективної відповіді на ці дії російському агресору. Ми обговорили спільну роботу над підготовкою до другого саміту миру. Розраховуємо на підтримку американської та британської дипломатій у розширенні коаліції формули миру та кількості підписантів підсумкового комюніке саміту миру. Формула миру не має альтернатив. Окремо зупинилися на подальшій інтеграції України в НАТО. Цей курс для нас залишається і є пріоритетним та незмінним. Потребуємо історичних рішень на шляху, історичних та швидких рішень на шляху до вступу України в Альянс. Членство України в НАТО – це необхідна умова для міцного та довгострокового миру в Європі. Насамкінець хочу відзначити дуже високий рівень обізнаності наших партнерів із ситуацією в Україні та повне розуміння, що перемога України у війні є необхідною умовою для мирного майбутнього Європи та усього світу. Дякуємо нашим найближчим союзникам за лідерство у підтримці України. День був дійсно насиченим і продуктивним. І передаю слово своєму американському колезі Ентоні Блінкену. Прошу.
Well, Andrii, thank you very, very much. And thank you for your hospitality today, but also thank you for the very good work we've been able to do today. I was very pleased as well with David Lammy to be able to spend time with President Zelensky and other colleagues. And the Foreign Secretary and I came to Ukraine today to really hear from our partners how we can continue to work together to help Ukraine defend its people, defend its territory through the fall fighting season into the winter as Putin continues his vicious war of aggression. And also how to continue to set up Ukraine for success as a strong, independent country for the long term. We're going to take what we learned back to President Biden in my case and the Prime Minister in David's case. The two of them will meet in just a few days' time in Washington to discuss how our countries will continue to support Ukraine. And we'll also use what we learned to further rally support among many countries that are behind Ukraine. We'll be at the UN General Assembly in just a couple of weeks' time. We'll be meeting with many allies and partners as well who are in NATO, the G7, the compact of states that have signed bilateral security agreements with Ukraine. All of this is happening in the coming weeks. It's important that the Ukrainian people continue to hear directly from us. We remain fully committed to Ukraine's victory, to not only ensuring that Ukraine can defend itself today, but can stand on its own feet strongly, militarily, economically, democratically, for many, many days ahead, to securing the path the Ukrainian people have chosen toward greater integration in the Euro-Atlantic community, including the European Union and NATO, to getting a just and lasting peace. The bottom line is this: we want Ukraine to win, and we're fully committed to keep marshaling the support that it needs for its brave defenders and citizens to do just that. Now, support for Ukraine will endure because it doesn't depend on any one country, any one party, any one election. Here today, the United States, the United Kingdom are united in support of Ukraine and its success. But we're united along with dozens of other countries, including the enduring coalition of more than 50 countries that have provided more than $100 billion in security aid to Ukraine since February of 2022 and continue to materially support Ukraine today. Our message, our collective message to Putin is clear. Our support will not wane. Our unity will not break. Putin will not outlast the coalition of countries committed to Ukraine's success, and he is certainly not going to outlast the Ukrainian people. They've never wavered in their belief that they, and they alone, will decide their future. Now, we have challenging moments. This is a challenging moment as well, with an expansion of attacks from Russia, pummeling Ukrainian cities, citizens, infrastructure, with monstrous brutality. And now Putin's further empowering his aggression with the acquisition of Iranian ballistic missiles. So, we're working with urgency to continue to ensure that Ukraine has what it needs to effectively defend itself. At the NATO summit back in July, President Biden promised 5 strategic air defense systems and dozens of tactical air defense systems. We've delivered on several of those strategic systems. We're fully working to meet the commitment in the coming weeks, and will continue to add to Ukraine's air defense systems. We've also supported and trained the F-16 program that is now flying over Ukraine. The United States continues to be the largest provider of security assistance to Ukraine and to lead the international coalition in support of its defense. As we're meeting here today, we're again seeing Putin dust off his winter playbook, targeting Ukrainian energy and electricity systems to weaponize the cold against the Ukrainian people. That's why today we're announcing $325 million in new funding to help repair Ukraine's energy and electric grid, And we'll rally additional support from the G7 plus countries when we have a meeting of the Energy Coordination Group in the next couple of weeks. I'm also announcing today $290 million in new humanitarian support to help provide vital services like safe drinking water, food, shelter, medicine to millions of people in Ukraine and around the region who've been displaced by Putin's war. And finally, we're announcing $102 million in additional funding in humanitarian demining to help remove landmines and unexploded ordnance that Russia's left behind across Ukraine. Now, support for Ukraine's defense and recovery is not only coming from Ukraine's partners. The United States and our G7 partners agreed to deliver $50 billion from Russia's frozen assets to pay for Ukraine's reconstruction and defense. And we're working to meet that commitment, to operationalize it. And we and our allies will continue to impose costs on countries that support Russia's war machine. For all of these challenges, Ukraine has made remarkable progress on each of its key goals since I was last here, which is back in May. They've made progress militarily in standing up a strong, enduring capacity to deter and defend against aggression. At the July summit, we declared that Ukraine's path to NATO membership is irreversible. And for the first time, NATO established a command dedicated to support Ukraine's membership. Last time I was here, 9 countries had completed bilateral security agreements with Ukraine. Now that number is 26 and counting, including, of course, the United States and the United Kingdom. That will provide a foundation of support for Ukraine's defense for years to come. And Ukraine's defense industrial base has grown 6-fold in the last year alone. In the coming years, that's going to give Ukraine one of the most advanced defense industries in the world, and it will be able to take that to the global market and take global market share away from other countries like Russia, and also supply NATO allies. Ukraine's making economic progress. We've been taking steps to make it easier for investors and companies to do business here in Ukraine. For example, together with the private sector, we recently announced a first-of-its-kind $350 million war risk reinsurance facility. That's going to make it easier for companies to invest, even as the war goes on. And Ukraine continues to make progress on deepening its democracy. It's taken important steps, including the Rada recently passing a law to reform oversight of financial crimes, expanding the number of judges on the anti-corruption court, delivering prosecutions in high-profile corruption cases. The active engagement and leadership on the part of Ukraine's engaged and committed civil society has been crucial to this progress. Now, more work needs to be done on reform. Ukraine needs to ensure investors and businesses that they're treated fairly and don't have to compete in a gray market. Ukraine needs institutions that are independent, effective, and free from political interference. That's crucial for the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, for its regulatory bodies and the boards of state-owned enterprises, and for the customs legislation that's currently before the Rada. These and other reforms Ukraine is pursuing because it's in Ukraine's interest to do so. It's what the Ukrainian people want. It's also essential as Ukraine moves down the path to the European Union and to NATO. The enduring commitment of the Ukrainian people is one of the main reasons that we're confident Ukraine will keep moving forward. No matter how great the obstacles thrown in their way, Ukrainians have demonstrated time and again that nothing can stand in the way of a people committed to shaping their own future.
Well, thank you, Lammy, for welcoming me here to KYIV. And thank you, Tony, for joining me on this important and historic visit. I last visited in May, and I return today at a vital time because we are united in our ironclad support for Ukraine. For 2.5 years, you have bravely and fiercely defended yourselves against Russia's full-scale invasion. But as we heard today, Putin's ugly attempts to restore the Russian Empire began much earlier, with the illegal annexation of Crimea 10 years ago. Putin claims he wishes to liberate Ukrainian civilians, but he denies the right of their nation to exist. He has sent in tanks and soldiers to enforce his diktat, and he inflicts horrors on Crimea and other regions of Ukraine under the Russian yoke, with stories of forced disappearances, sinister re-education camps, and torture. Putin's barbaric actions are the latest example of a very old and evil story. One of my ancestors was taken from their home, enslaved, chained on a ship, and forced to work for the profit of a foreign empire. He knew only too well what imperialism was. No act of authoritarianism is ever exactly the same. But 80 years after Stalin deported the Crimean Tatars, 240 years after Catherine the Great annexed Crimea, Putin has revealed the same arrogance, the same greed, the same disdain for the rights of other individuals and nations. This is imperialism. This is fascism. And this week we have been reminded of how other authoritarian regimes are aiding Putin, with Iran going even further in support for Moscow by providing ballistic missiles, a significant and dangerous escalation. Britain and the US and our partners have responded quickly to Tehran's undermining of global security. Britain has sanctioned Iranian officials and entities, as well as Russian entities and cargo ships involved in the transfer of weapons. And together we've restricted Iran's air flights to Europe. This response is in keeping with our commitment to remain Ukraine's staunchest friend. And I'm proud of that commitment. I'm proud of Prime Minister Starmer's commitment to provide $3 billion in military aid every year that is needed in your fight. And today I can confirm more than 600 million worth of support for Ukraine, including 242 million this financial year for immediate humanitarian, energy and stabilization needs, as well as support for reform, recovery and reconstruction. Plus, we're confirming our intention to deploy $484 million worth of World Bank loan guarantees later this year. And the UK is speeding up military deliveries with air defence missiles, equipment of F-16 fighter jets, AS-90 self-propelled guns and spare barrels, military boats and maritime guns having now been delivered. I can announce we will now also send hundreds of additional air defence missiles, tens of thousands of additional artillery ammunition rounds, and more armoured vehicles to Ukraine by the end of the year. But I am most proud of the unity we and our allies have shown in support for Ukraine. And that is why our joint visit today, the first joint visit of its kind for well over a decade, is such an important signal. Together, Britain and our allies are united in our commitment to Ukraine, to freedom, to victory, because we both recognise what is at stake here, not just the liberty of Ukraine, but the security of Europe and the security of the West, and indeed the very principles that underpin the UN Charter, on which rests the international order as it stands, which has brought peace and prosperity to so many. It's good to be with here. It's good to stand with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellencies. We'll now take a few questions, starting with Michael Birbaum from WAPO. I only have one microphone, so.
Thanks very much. Michael Birnbaum from the Washington Post. Mr. Secretary, Mr. Foreign Secretary, question about ATACMS. How, and long-range missile Storm Shadows, How worried are you at this point about managing escalation with Russia, based on your conversations today? And does the Ukrainian desire to use ATACMS, Storm Shadows, long-range missiles against the Kerch Bridge that connects Crimea to mainland Russia make sense to you strategically? And what's your personal view of whether Ukraine needs this long-range capability of striking into Russian territory, especially now that, as you say, Iran has facilitated Russia's ability to strike more deeply into Ukraine? And Mr. Foreign Minister, former President Donald Trump was asked a couple times last night at the debate whether he was committed to Ukrainian victory. He said he wanted the war to end as quickly as possible, but he didn't say yes to victory. I wanted to ask what you made of that and what kind of plans you are making in case there is a change in U.S. policy sometime soon. Thanks a lot.
Michael, thank you very much. I'm happy to start. First, we had a very good discussion today with the Foreign Minister, with President Zelensky, with his whole team about the situation on the battlefield, Ukraine's objectives, and what it needs to succeed going forward. And among other things, we discussed long-range fires, but a number of other things as well. And as I said at the outset, I'm going to take that discussion back to Washington to brief the President on what I heard. I know that David's doing the same. And both of our bosses, no doubt, will discuss this when they meet later this week, actually on Friday in Washington. Just speaking for the United States, from day one, as you've heard me say, we have adjusted and adapted as needs have changed, as the battlefield has changed, and I have no doubt that we'll continue to do that as this evolves. You referenced escalation. Of course, that's one of the factors that we always consider, but it's certainly not the only factor, and it's not necessarily a dispositive factor. We have provided, as you know, extraordinary support to Ukraine over these more than 2 years. Not just training, not just money, but among our most sophisticated weapon systems. Again, tied to what their needs are, tied to what can make them most effective. And I think the track record is there. We're determined to ensure that they have what they need to succeed. And when it comes to escalation, you made the point yourself. We've seen Russia now pursue and indeed escalate its attacks inside Ukraine on civilians, on energy infrastructure, as well as on the Ukrainian military that's defending its country. And we've now seen this action of Russia acquiring ballistic missiles from Iran, which will further empower their aggression in Ukraine. So if anyone is taking escalatory action, it would appear to be Mr. Putin and Russia. I'll leave specific targets and questions for the experts. And of course, I don't have personal views. I have professional views in my capacity as Secretary of State, and I'll be sharing what we've learned on this trip with the President in the coming days.
The escalator here is Putin. It is Putin who has escalated this week with the shipment of ballistic missiles from Iran. And we're seeing this new axis. Russia, Iran, North Korea. We urge China not to throw their lot in with this group of renegades. Renegades, in the end, that are costing lives here in Ukraine. So it's been very important for me to be here with Secretary Blinken, to meet, to listen, to learn, to strategize, yes, and to be able to inform the UK Prime Minister as we head out to Washington for further discussions. I'm also minded that as we head into the autumn, we have the UN General Assembly, where we're meeting with allies and parts of global majority countries, also to ensure that we have that support for Ukraine as we head into the late autumn and the winter. we have the G20, other forums, and we've wanted to talk about how we build on those opportunities going forward and how we put Ukraine in the best possible position as they head into a winter. And that has been the basis of the discussion. But let us be clear, we've not just talked about military support. We've talked further about sanctions. We've talked further about the humanitarian needs. We've had a detailed conversation about energy because of horrendous Russian attacks on energy supplies here in Ukraine. So this has been a breadth of conversation across the board about very strong allies and about our commitment. The UK commitment is not just for this winter. We're talking about a 100-year partnership because we stand with Ukraine for the long haul.
Я повністю поділяю оцінки, які щойно прозвучали, це щодо ескалації. І з свого боку додам. Я дуже добре пам'ятаю, коли перед кожним принциповим рішенням щодо постачання нового чи нової якості типу озброєння для України постійно стояло питання ескалації, але рішення приймалось. І достатньо було волі і сміливості в наших союзників-партнерів ці рішення приймати. Мені здається, що після Курської операції українських військових ми можемо чітко говорити, що точка боязні ескалації подолана. Тепер щодо вашого запитання про можливі наслідки президентських виборів в США. Так, це очевидно, що буде новий президент, але ми віримо і переконані в твердій підтримці американського народу. Ми твердо віримо і переконані в двопартійній підтримці. І ми чітко віримо і переконані в тому, що досягнення справедливого, всеосяжного, тривалого миру в Україні – це теж стратегічний інтерес Сполучених Штатів Америки, який і буде збережено. Тому що ми захищаємо спільні цінності, ми захищаємо спільні демократичні цінності і віримо і переконані в стратегічному демократичному лідерстві США.
Дякую. Emma Murphy, ITV.
Thank you very much. Emma Murphy from ITV News. If I could pose a question to you, Foreign Secretary, and also you, Secretary of State, with regard to President Zelensky's comments today. He said that he would like to see a strong decision on the use of long-range missiles into Russia. How confident are you that you can take a message back to your superiors that will convince them of the need for that and get over divisions within your own governments potentially about the risk of escalation? And also, Mr. Foreign Secretary, could I ask how important it is to Ukraine on the battlefield that the long-range missiles are allowed?
Question. We've had detailed conversations today with President Zelensky. We recognize that Ukraine is on the front line of the fight for freedom, and also that over these last few weeks we've seen a tremendous loss of life of innocent men, women and children here in Ukraine. And I and the Secretary of State rededicate ourselves to supporting Ukraine at this particular time. President Zelensky expressed gratitude and thanks for Britain's $3 billion a year commitment that will continue for as long as this fight is needed. He expressed thanks for the milestone of the International Fund for Ukraine, the $1 billion that we are committed to. And he's grateful for the new package of military support, ammunition, brimstone missiles, AS-90 artillery guns that we are providing. We are concerned about the attacks on Ukraine's energy. We are concerned about these glide bombs. We are concerned about the drones. we're very concerned about the escalatory action that we're seeing from Iran particularly. We've looked at the breadth of things today, and as we've said, of course, I go back to Keir Starmer, able to assist him with some of the operational detail that we've learned from the Ukrainians today. You wouldn't expect me to go into detail about that at this press conference because I am not prepared to give Putin the advantage. But as the closest of allies, we look forward to the discussions we will have, not just on Friday, but discussions, I suspect, that will go on over the next few weeks as we head also to the UN General Assembly.
Good evening, the public broadcaster of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin. So, Minister Sybiha mentioned Ukrainian path to NATO. So, is it possible that allies ready to invite Ukraine to join NATO maybe this year? And one more. So, the coalition within NATO is being formed to shoot down drones and missiles over Ukraine. Maybe there is a discussion between, I don't know, Great Britain and the US and Germany. And I think the last one, are you ready to invest in Ukrainian production of drones, maybe missiles as well? Thanks a lot.
United Kingdom is already investing in Ukrainian production of drones, and what I saw on my last trip to Ukraine was an amazing civilian, what we would call a blitz spirit, evoking the Second World War in Ukraine. It's humbling, it's moving to see people doing all they can to prevent this Russian aggression. Britain are supportive of Ukraine's ambitions in relation to NATO and the security guarantees that they necessarily need, and that's why we work very hard with our allies to get that irreversible pathway language into the text that we were able to agree back in July, just as the new Labour government came to power. And we will continue, of course, to discuss these things with our allies. And the other issue, of course, that Secretary Blinken has raised today is the continued need to work with Ukraine on these fundamental reform issues that make its pathway to the European Union and to NATO more achievable in the medium term.
And really just to reiterate what the Foreign Secretary said, NATO allies came together, made clear that Ukraine's path to NATO is irreversible, and now Ukraine is moving down that path. I mentioned a few moments ago that for the first time in NATO's history, it has stood up a dedicated command whose purpose is to help NATO move down the path to membership, and that command is up and running, and we have a representative here in Ukraine, so all of that is moving forward. And it's important that as that moves forward, Ukraine continue to move forward on the necessary reforms. But we see that on track and moving forward. With regard to the defense industrial base, I mentioned as well a moment ago, Ukraine's defense industrial base has increased 6 times over the last couple of years. That's the result of tremendous investment that a number of us have made. I think what's so important about that is that it also sets up Ukraine for the long term, because one measure of success, one measure of Ukraine's success, is going to be its capacity to stand strongly on its own feet militarily, as well as economically and democratically. And militarily, these investments in the defense industrial base, the production of what it needs to defend itself, not just today, but for many years to come, is the best way to guarantee that there's not a repeat of Russian aggression, that Ukraine has the capacity to deter aggression and, if necessary, to defend against it. We're also taking steps, besides making direct investments ourselves, as Foreign Secretary alluded to, we're also trying to make it easier for the private sector to do more in Ukraine, even in the midst of the Russian aggression. Some of the risk insurance is critical to that, and we've set up a facility to do that. I think companies around the world see Ukraine as a very attractive place for investment, even with the ongoing aggression, because of Ukrainian capacity. And that includes the Defense Industrial Base. Deputy Secretary of State Verma was just here a few days ago, bringing members of the American private sector with him, including from the defense industry, and we expect things to come out of that. So all of this is moving forward. And again, I just want to emphasize, there are two goals in mind. Make sure that Ukraine has what it needs now to deal with the ongoing Russian aggression, but also make sure that it has what it needs to have an enduring success, to be a strong, independent country, increasingly integrated with the institutions of the Euro-Atlantic community, including the European Union and including NATO.
Я теж прокоментую ваше запитання щодо необхідності та можливості збиття російських ракет та дронів на територію України. Вже є непоодинокі випадки порушення і російськими об'єктами повітряного простору сусідніх країн НАТО. Ми вважаємо, що Росія тим самим тестує і рішучість, і єдність НАТО, тому має бути тверда, рішуча відповідь спільна союзників на такі провокативні і ескалаційні дії росіян, які все частіше б'ють по об'єктах близько до кордону НАТО, по об'єктах, які поруч знаходяться з ядерними станціями України, почали бити і по наших підземних сховищах, які дуже близько знаходяться до західного кордону. Нагадаю, що у нашій безпековій угоді, яку підписав президент Зеленський з Туском, є пункт, в якому передбачається практична фаза консультацій між союзниками щодо вивчення можливості збиття ракет на територію України. І ми вважаємо, що це би був гідний і правильний крок на цьому напрямку. Сьогодні я мав розмову з генеральним секретарем НАТО, і я йому подякував за його публічну тверду позицію щодо такого рішення. Друге, ви запитували про наш шлях і швидкість до НАТО. Я дозволю собі поділитися спогадами. Я був поруч з Зеленським в бункері після 24 числа, і на другий день президент Зеленський прийняв рішення подати офіційну заявку стати асоційованим членом Європейського Союзу. Це, щоб ви просто розуміли логіку і той дух, який панував. Російські війська в цей час стояли під Києвом, лунала канонада. Але з тих стратегічних розумінь таке рішення було прийнято. На четвертий день ми підготували необхідні документи в дуже вузькому форматі і подали цю заявку. Через півроку ми отримали цей статус, виконавши по дорозі необхідне домашнє завдання і необхідні вимоги. Тому ми потребуємо і швидких, і історичних рішень щодо наближення України, щодо наближення членства України в НАТО. Якщо буде така політична воля, ми готові і сьогодні стати членом НАТО. Дякую.